breathing and exchange of gases. The breathing and exchange of gases, particularly the respiratory gases. Breathing and exhaling gases. So, what gases that we are speaking of here is, we can say, the respiratory gases, particularly involved in the human respiratory system. The respiratory gases, two kinds of gases that we're going to be speaking about throughout the lesson, that is O2 and CO2. Right? So, O2 and CO2 will be the point of our discussion. First, we'll try to understand why the chapter has been named like this. What is the meaning of this? When you try to understand the meaning of this chapter, so the breathing. So the breathing, we have alternative names here for the word breathing. So that is, we can also call it as ventilation, and we all have the ventilators in our homes, right? So what do they do? What do they do is, they allow the external air into our homes, and if you are in a stuffy room, and if there is no free exchange of air, immediately you open the windows so that all this stuffy air that is in the room can escape out, and the fresh air from the environment or from the atmosphere can come, right? Can come into the room. Same way here, what is happening here is the ventilation is happening. So what is the meaning of the ventilation happening here is, in our body, as a result of the metabolic activities, right? As a result of breaking down of food molecules in the cells, the gas that is being produced will be the CO2, right? The CO2 gas is being produced, and the CO2 gas has to be eliminated out because it is harmful. Right? And as it is getting eliminated, and we also need to bring back the gas which is required for our body. The gas that is required is oxygen, right? Oxygen has to be brought in. So this is the exchange that is taking place, right? CO2 is being sent out and oxygen has been brought in. Yes, so this goes outside and this comes inside. CO2 goes outside and O2 comes inside. So this process of these two gases, the process of these two gases going out and coming in is called as the ventilation. Or you can also call it as the breathing, right? So what we have discussed is, we have tried to understand the meaning of breathing. And we said the breathing is nothing but the ventilation, right? We said the breathing is nothing but the ventilation, and I have given the real life example of how, when we are in a stuffy room, how we feel there is lack of oxygen for it. That's why you open your windows to allow the fresh air. This fresh air is nothing but the air that has the oxygen, right? The air that has the oxygen. You are allowing this oxygenated air into the room. That means inside of the room, in this case inside of our bodies. Yes, and you are sending out. So whatever, because of your respiratory activities, all your room is filled with carbon dioxide. You don't want to be breathing all of that. That's why you are feeling suffocated, right? So you will be feeling suffocated as a result of that. There is more of CO2 when you compare with the O2. Yes, that is why. So this CO2 will be sent outside, right? So the exchange is taking place. This exchange is ventilation, and apart from ventilation, it is also called as respiration. So this is a tricky term. Most of the times we get confused here. with the term breathing and with the term respiration. If you see, so in our botany lessons, we have seen the respiratory processes, the cellular respiration that is happening inside the cells, right? The cellular respiration that is happening, that is the cellular respiration that is happening inside the cells, But in here, we are calling it as respiration. The exchange you are calling it as respiration. Why is that? Here is because in here the respiratory organs are involved. Yes, the respiratory organs are involved. What are the so-called respiratory organs? We have all kinds of respiratory organs. The respiratory tubes, starting with the nostrils, right? The external openings to the level of alveoli. These are all the respiratory activities, right? So there is no cellular respiration without the respiratory organs. Yes, all this air has to be brought in with the respiratory tubes. So that is why you would call it as the respiration as well, right? So now with this term breathing, right? So with this term breathing, we have two more terms associated with it. One is ventilation and one is respiration. The breathing is called as ventilation solely because of the reason, right? The breathing is called as ventilation solely because of the reason the exchange is happening just like anywhere that you see. You are in a stuffy car, you open the windows, right? You are in a stuffy room, you also open the windows, right? So that is the ventilation. And here also the respiration, because the respiratory organs are involved, right? So in this part, as the air, right? So as this gases, the air passes through this respiratory organs. So based on what level it is there, right? Based on to what extent it has passed, you can call the respiration as two types, right? We can call the respiration as two types. One is the external respiration. One is the external respiration, and the other one that we have is the internal respiration. So now what is happening in here? The external respiration and internal respiration. As we have said, in the breathing, in the ventilation, the exchange of gases is happening. Yes. So the exchange of gases. What gases? The CO2 and O2. Two gases are getting exchanged. Where are they getting exchanged? Right? So in our body, the gaseous exchange, right? The gaseous exchange occurs in two locations. The gaseous exchange is occurring in two locations. What are these two locations? One is at alveoli. Another one is at tissues. Two locations. How it is getting exchanged there? In these two locations, we have something called the exchange membrane. Respiratory exchange membrane. With the help of this exchange membrane, these gases simply diffuse into and diffuse out, right in here. So here the O2 which is present in the atmosphere here, right? The O2 which is present in the atmosphere, right, diffuse into alveoli, right? So diffuse into blood. Where? At the alveoli. At the alveoli, what do we have is, we have the exchange membrane. How it is getting diffused here? Because of the presence of exchange membrane where? At the alveoli. At the alveoli, we have this exchange membrane. At the alveoli, we have this exchange membrane, so that this oxygen is getting diffused into the blood. Then what is happening at the tissues? Is obviously as a result of this cellular respiration, metabolic activities, right? As a result of this metabolic activities, this CO2 that is there now has to be sent out, We also have a membrane there, respiratory exchange membrane. So it will be diffused out. So here diffused in, right? Here the O2 is diffused in, and here the O2 is diffused out, and it is happening at the tissues. That is the story here, right? That is the story. And now we need to understand and why it is called as external and why it is called as the internal. So that is the question, right? The reason why it is called as external here is because it is the exchange is happening outside. The exchange is happening outside. That is externally. The exchange is happening externally. What does that mean? The exchange happening externally. You see, the air, the oxygen. What is its location? It is present in the atmosphere. Right? It is present in the atmosphere. So from the atmosphere, it has to be brought in with the help of respiratory tubes, right? So this tubular system, this respiratory tubular system begins with nostrils. So we're going to study the details about this nostrils and other respiratory tubes. I'll just give you the brief idea here. Yes, the atmosphere, from the atmosphere, the nostrils, right? So we have internal nostrils and we have external nostrils. So it begins with the external nostrils and it will be taken to the nasal chamber. It will be taken to the nasal chamber, from the nasal chamber to internal nostrils, right? From there to pharynx, from there to trachea, from there to the bronchi and bronchioles. Ultimately, it will be taken to the alveoli, right? The ultimate destination from across all these respiratory tubes. Respiratory tubes to it is taken to the alveoli. Ultimately, it has been taken to the alveoli. And when I see throughout this passage, it is still outside only. Technically, it is in the tube. It is not diffused into the body yet, right? It's not diffused into the body. It is still in the tubes only. Say, for example, you have a tube. You have a tube, and this tube is kind of closed at one end. And you blow the air into the tube, right? So, is the air, if it is connected to outside atmosphere, and does that mean the air is inside or outside, right? Obviously, since it is connected to the atmosphere, without closing it off, then you can call it as it is still present in the atmosphere only. Still present in the outside only, because it's connected to the atmosphere. You see, all of this is the atmosphere, right? So some of it has gone in. Let's say, for example, you have alveoli here, right? So we have alveoli here. So all of air is still connected to this. It still hasn't been diffused into the body, right? It still hasn't been diffused, has not been diffused into the body. Since it has not been diffused into the body, we can still consider it is being outside. So that is why it is called as external respiration. The same thing can be said about the digestive system as well. As long as the food that is there in the alimentary canal, which is not absorbed, right, into the body, can still be considered the food being outside, right? So if it is absorbed into the body, then you can call it as the food has been taken into the body. So long as it's not absorbed, you cannot say that it is technically inside of the body. So here also the same thing. So that is why it is called as the external respiration. And then I made my point here. The simple concept, the external respiration is as long as the air is outside. The only point I am making that here is, so all of this is the atmosphere, right? And it has been taken to the alveoli with the assistance of these respiratory tubes. Since it is still connected to the atmosphere, all this air is common, right? All this air is common, and because it has the connection here, that is why it is called as the external respiration. So as a result of this external respiration, where does the blood is placed? Where does the blood is placed is the blood is placed. Oh, sorry. Where does the air is placed? Right. So where does these gases are placed? They are placed in the blood, as I have explained before. Right. They are placed in the blood. Primarily the O2. So obviously you would know how the diffusion occurs. The diffusion from the higher concentration to lower concentration, obviously at the site of alveoli. The site of alveoli you will have more of O2 because the atmosphere has more of O2 when compared with the body. Why the body has less of oxygen is the body has utilized all of this oxygen releasing the CO2. That's why in the CO2 you will that's why in the alveoli in the body you will have more of CO2. You will have more of CO2 but before diffusing into, right? So you will have more of CO2 and the atmosphere you will have more of O2, right? So this will be the atmosphere. You will have more of O2 within the body. Within the body, you will have more of CO2. So at the alveoli, so what will be taken up is so the O2 at the alveoli, the O2 will be taken up by the body and the CO2 will be released. The exchange is happening here in the internal respiration. In the internal respiration, whatever the O2 that has been taken in here, whatever the O2 that has been taken at the site of alveoli will now be taken to the level of tissues. Will now be taken to the tissues with the help of the circulatory system. Right? Will now be taken to the tissues, and at the site of tissues, it is taken into the cells. Right? At the site of tissues, the oxygen is now taken into the cells. And again diffusing the CO2 into the blood. And we will see how this diffusion occurs at the membrane level. So at this juncture, at this point, you all need to be remembering the difference between external and internal respiration. External respiration deals with the exchange of air which is present in the atmosphere. Internal respiration deals with the exchange of air within the body at the tissue level, and it is at the alveolar level. Okay. So that is, so to sum up briefly what we have discussed in this part is, let's try to understand what are these terms at all, right? So breathing, I have given two terms for you, right? Ventilation and respiration. Yes. Then we have tried to understand, so what is the external and internal respiration? External respiration, where the exchange happens at the site of alveoli, and internal respiration where the exchange happens at the site of tissues. In both the locations, what is getting exchanged? Is the two gases are getting exchanged, that is O2 and CO2. How they are getting exchanged is because of the concentration differences, right? Because of the concentration differences, the exchange is happening. And in this lesson, the primary idea for us to understand how this exchange occurs, right? What are the various factors drive this exchange, right? That is a brief introductory concept for you about the breathing and exchange of gases. Now next lesson we'll see what are the different kinds of respiratory surfaces that we have in the animal world, right? So across from the lower organisms to higher organisms, what kind of exchange mechanisms these organisms will follow. Briefly, just we'll touch upon them. Yes. So that is of you. Hope we made a good class here. So thank you. We shall meet again in the next class.